At the end of the winding alleys of Greenwich Village, where New York's artists gathered in the early 20th century, old brick buildings stood huddled together. On the top floor of one such building, in a small studio with a large north-facing window, lived two young female painters named Sue and Johnsy. Sue, from Maine, and Johnsy, from California, had found each other through their shared passion for art and made this place their home. But that November, a cold wind brought an uninvited guest to the village. This unseen stranger, whom doctors called pneumonia, stalked the streets, touching one here and there with his icy fingers. Eventually, even the fragile Johnsy found herself in his cold grip. Lying in her bed, Johnsy stared out the window with vacant eyes and began to count backward in a low whisper. 12, 11, 10. Sue looked out the window with a heavy heart, but there was nothing to see but a dreary yard, the blank wall of the brick house next door, and an old, gnarled ivy vine clinging to it. Most of its leaves had already been torn away by the cold autumn wind, leaving only the bare skeleton of the vines. "What are you counting, Johnsy?" Sue asked. Johnsy replied in a weary voice. "The leaves on the ivy vine. When the last one falls, I must go, too. I've known it for 3 days." Sue tried to scold her friend for such a foolish obsession and cooked her some hot soup, but it was no use. The doctor whispered to Sue,
"When a patient loses the will to live, medicine is powerless. If you can get her to care about the sleeve length of this winter's new coats, I can increase her chances of survival to 50%.
Suppressing her tears, Sue went downstairs to find Behrman, an old painter. He had wielded his brush for 40 years but had yet to produce a single masterpiece. He was a humble artist, smelling of gin and sporting a long, sage-like beard, but he considered himself a loyal watchdog for the two young ladies upstairs. When Sue explained Johnsy's condition, old Behrman roared with anger.
"Is there such foolishness in the world? To die because ivy leaves drop? Someday I will paint a masterpiece, and we shall all go away from here. Until then, do not let her speak of such weakness."
That night, a fierce storm broke loose. The wind and rain beat violently against the windows, and even sleet began to fall in the biting cold. Believing that the last leaf would surely be gone by morning, Johnsy fell into a deep sleep, as if preparing for her own end. The next morning, Johnsy asked in a trembling voice for the curtains to be opened. Sue was afraid, but she reluctantly pulled the cord. Then, a miracle happened. Despite the savage storm that had raged all night, one ivy leaf was still standing bravely against the brick wall. Near the stem, it was a dark green, but its serrated edges were tinted with the yellow of decay. The leaf stood alone, holding its place. "It hasn't fallen yet," Johnsy murmured, disbelieving. "That leaf is there to tell me how wicked I was. It is a sin to want to die." Life began to return to Johnsy's eyes. She looked into the mirror, drank her soup, and spoke again of her dream as an artist to one day paint the Bay of Naples. The doctor returned with the joyful news that Johnsy's chances were now 100%. But at the same time, he brought sad news. Old Behrman, the painter downstairs, had just passed away from acute pneumonia. He had been found outside in the cold on the first night of the storm. Beside him lay a still-lit lantern, a ladder that had been dragged out, scattered brushes, and a palette smeared with green and yellow paints. Sue looked out the window at the last leaf and whispered to Johnsy. "Johnsy, look at that leaf. Doesn't it seem strange that it never flutters when the wind blows? It's because old Behrman painted it there the night the last leaf fell. That leaf was the one masterpiece he had always wanted to paint." O. Henry, the master of American short stories. His real name was William Sidney Porter. His life was as tumultuous as the stories he wrote. Once wrongfully accused and imprisoned, he spent his time listening to the stories of ordinary neighbors living in the most difficult circumstances. In the back alleys of the desolate city of New York, O. Henry found warm humor and brilliant twists even within tragic realities. The last leaf, left by old Behrman, was not just a painting. It was life itself, born from a desperate desire to save another. When we feel alone in the fierce storms of life, perhaps there is someone beside us, enduring the rain all night, painting hope just for us. This has been O. Henry's The Last Leaf. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe.